can't see my shoe choice. Alright, my name is Isaiah, and oh, you can't, my head's cut off. I'm going to be washing this absolutely filthy BMW X5. My friend went on a road trip and apparently just only drove through mud. I didn't do my hair this morning. You can see how much mud is caked on this thing. That is not very focused. Yeah, this is gonna be some work. All the way down. Mud. Mud. I don't even know how that happens. That's not gonna be easy. More mud. Yeah, you can really see this is dirty. I'll get to it. So I'm gonna be starting with the tires and the wheels and wheel wells. So prior to spraying any chemicals on the car, I like to start by pressure washing it, especially on the wheels. And with this much mud, just means you get to use less products, a little bit less scrubbing, and you know, just takes overall less time. You know, some places you can't do this because you don't have access to water, but if you do have access to water, this is a great way to do it. You can also just use a hose. Also, this is a great way to help clean the tire and wheel well. You'd be surprised how much you can do with just a pressure washer. This is brake buster at full strength. So after spraying the chemical on, letting it sit for, you know, maybe 20 seconds or so, depends on how hot it is outside, if you're in the sun, etc. I like to start with a small detail brush. The one I'm using here is boar's hair, I believe. This lets me just get the details really quick, so I go for, you know, any corners and the valve stem to inflate the tire, as well as the lug nuts, and then if there are any emblems. Then I move on to this larger brush. This is a flag tip brush. You can use this on the paint as well, and it's totally safe. I believe I got this one from the rag company. This is good for, you know, cleaning larger areas. It doesn't have a huge amount of scrubbing power, but if you're using the right cleaner, it's totally fine. Another thing is, if you are working in the sun, try and avoid letting the cleaner dry on the paint. If you do, depending on the cleaner, it will be fine, but it's just kind of a pain in the butt to get off usually. With this stuff, I've never had any issues. So after every time I use a brush, and before I use the brush, I like to rinse it off with my pressure washer. You can also have a bucket of soapy water or just water if you want to do that, but I prefer using the pressure washer or hose method because I can make sure that I have a perfectly clean brush every time. This avoids any scratching. It also cleans better. You can see how much mud is coming out from the barrel of the wheel right there, so I'm having to blow it out a lot with the water. But on a normal wheel, you'll only have to do this at the beginning and the end, and it helps a lot. This is ridiculous. So for cleaning the tire, here I believe I'm still using the brake buster. I'm also using a stiff bristle brush. You can see me rinsing it out there. Sometimes I prefer to use power clean on the tires. If they're not very dirty, I'll just use the brake buster like this, but in this case they are pretty dirty, so you can see me there. I'm also using power clean. There I'm using it on the fender wells in there. I would recommend not mixing chemicals, so you know, if you're going to spray one on the wheel face and one inside the fender, that's okay, but don't spray one on the face and then right afterwards follow it up with another. I would definitely avoid that. So for cleaning the inner fender, I'm going to be using Power Clean. This is probably a 3 or 5 to 1 dilution. I'm also using this longer brush. It has similar flag tips to the green brush, but it lets me reach in there further. There was a lot of mud caked in there, so I was using the longer pressure washer attachment. See that purple flowing off? Right there, all around the wheel. That's the chemical reacting with little particles of iron or rust that are stuck in the paint. So the chemical that I was using for this is Optimum's Ferrex. There are tons of them on the market. There's Iron X. Most manufacturers make one. It's essentially an iron remover. You can they'll be referred to as iron activators or ferrous metal removers. They all do the same thing. It's sodium thioglycolate. That's the active chemical in it, and it's not, you know, it's not dissolving iron or anything. It's just trapping the iron particles in solution. And then they can be easily rinsed off the paint. And you can see it turning purple as it reacts. It's pretty cool. That's not an effect, that's the actual chemical reaction happening. You can use this on paint before you polish or put a coating on a vehicle. And you can see me just going over the wheels one more time here with the brushes that I used previously. And it just helps get that next level of cleaning because it actually chemically removes embedded particles. So you can actually use this chemical as a clay lubricant as well on the paint. I like to use the Optimum's clay mitt because it has perforations and that helps make it a little bit more safe. And with Optimum's mitt, the chemical won't break down the clay surface as well. So that's a great way to get 2 steps done at once. So I've moved on to the back wheel at this point. I'm starting with pressure washing, trying to get some of that mud that's been caked into the fender. And as you can see, it's removing a lot of muddy water, but the actual mud and rocks that are in there are not coming off. So you'll see how I deal with that later. It took me hours, and I'm not exaggerating. The wheels took me the longest out of anything on this car. Still, you know, starting with the pressure washer to loosen up some of the mud is a good idea, especially on the wheel face. When using a pressure washer on any surface, primarily paint and anything that's on the fragile end, you want to be very careful. I would not get closer than, say, 6 inches on paint. In this case, it's really just on mud, so it's not going to hurt anything. I'm also using a relatively low power pressure washer with a very wide angle of spray, so you're really not going to hurt anything, but just be cautious. Here I'm using Power Clean to try and soften up some of the mud before I rinse it off. And I will tell you, this did basically nothing. The mud was like cement. Okay, so what I've been doing to get off all of this mud, which is piled up here, I'll zoom in and show you guys that. I've been taking the handle of the brush and just poking at it for like an hour, and I'm finally getting somewhere because it was stuck on so hard that the pressure washer wouldn't even get it off. My driveway is now a dirt driveway. Look at that. Dirt, dirt. And it's the same on the other side. I haven't even gotten to the car yet. So I am now done with the wheels. Wheel wells in there. Let's see, can I get that in focus? So you can see no more dirt. And now it's time to wash the car. I have 3 gallons of water. I'm going to do 1 cap full per gallon. So a lot of people tend to have the habit of just squirting some soap into a bucket and then foaming it up. I actually like to put the water in first and then measure it out to be the correct amount. This is very exciting. And I apologize for that mess in the back. It does not belong to me. One of my roommates is a pig. So I'm going to add a 1/2 ounce of car soap to my foam cannon. Most common practice to use 2 buckets. You have a wash bucket and a rinse bucket. But what I'm going to do is use 1 bucket, and I'm going to use multiple microfiber towels. 1 towel per panel or per 2 panels. And once it's dirty, I don't put it back in the bucket, and that way the solution in the bucket stays clean the entire time. So what I'm doing here is just pre-treating the paint with Optimum No Rinse before I pressure wash it. This can help prevent the paint from getting scratched. It's kind of controversial to say, pressure washing can scratch paint, but if you have dirt on the surface and you hit it with 2000 psi of water, you could inflict some damage, so just be careful. So to deal with bugs all over the front end, I'm foaming on Power Clean at 10:1 dilution in the IK foamer. Let it sit for a little bit and then go in with a few brushes as well as a bug scrubber that I will show you in a little bit. I do this prior to washing the car. It depends how bad it is. Sometimes you'll want to wash the car first, but I like to pre-treat it and at least hit it with the brushes a few times. That helps to loosen them up. So here I'm just going to add a little bit more Power Clean, same dilution, 10:1. This is just to try and soften up some of the dirt that's left over. It was pretty stubborn. You'll notice as I'm pressure washing, the water's not beating off the surface of the paint. And this can mean two things, either separately or together. It means either the paint is just really dirty and contaminated and it's not allowing the water to bead, or there's no protection on the paint. In this case, it's both of those things. So once I have the foam on the paint, I just go ahead straight to washing. I go one panel at a time. Unfortunately, my camera died while I was actually washing the car, so you won't be able to see that, but I will show you some after footage once it's all done, and it looks pretty good. Camera died, but here's the finished result. I'm using my phone. I don't know if you remember. There's all the dirt. There's the wheel well, dirt free. Paint's clean. But you know, there's some other issues like scratches. But otherwise, significantly better than it was.